You wake up before the sun ris not because you're eager, but because you have no choice. The faint crowing of a distant rooster is drowned out by the shrill clang of a village bell. There's no mattress, no cushion, no gentle warmth, just the chill of a morning that never asked if you were ready. In Imperial China, the morning didn't begin with coffee or leisure. It began with labor. A bowl of watery millet gruel might be waiting if your wife or mother had time to stir it over the low hearth fire. There's no meat unless it's a festival. Vegetables come from what didn't rot in the cellar. You take a bite, bland and sour. There's no salt today, too expensive. Your bed is not a bed at all, but a hard, raised platform covered with straw and maybe a blanket if your family could afford one. You sit up and immediately feel it in your joints. You're a peasant. 90% of the population was, or maybe the Mongols are raiding again. If you're a man and you're not too old or broken, you could be pressed into militia service, armed with a spear, no training, and a helmet made of lacquered leather. You'd stand shoulder to shoulder with other farmers-turned-soldiers, hoping the enemy's arrows would miss you. Your hands are already rough with calluses from years of working the rice paddies or hauling firewood. If drought strikes or floods devastate the land, it means the emperor has lost favor with heaven. And still, you kneel when the imperial procession passes, forehead pressed to the earth, because belief is all that keeps order intact. You might be conscripted to build a road, a dike, or a new section of the Great Wall. You're rarely educated. Your world is the household, its rituals, its unspoken rules. You manage the kitchen, bear children, and keep harmony within a complex web of extended family. You sleep to the rustle of rats, the creak of bamboo shutters, and the distant groan of someone coughing blood in the next room. Tuberculosis, dysentery, typhoid. Take your pick. Imperial China's medicine was advanced in theory, but limited in practice. The neighbor's ox has gone missing, stolen maybe. The magistrate's assistant will come tomorrow. If your family is suspected, you'll be whipped, fined, or worse. Justice, like food, flows unevenly. You might drink herbal concoctions or have heated needles inserted into your skin. But if you broke a bone or got an infection, the odds were stacked against you. Even your meals are eaten after the men have had theirs. The Forbidden City might as well have been a different planet while you toiled in the mud. He dined on delicacies: bird's nest soup, sea cucumbers, roast duck, and listened to court music as eunuchs fanned him with silk. But dawn always comes, and with it, the same aching weight of imperial survival. But even he was trapped in the system. One wrong move, one failed harvest, or one comet in the sky, and heaven's favor could shift. A rebellion would rise, a dynasty would fall. This system, known as, meant you could be yanked from your life for weeks or months to work on a project hundreds of miles away. Dowagers might wield influence over business and property, especially when men are away. Behind the silken screens, women whisper counsel that shapes decisions. Foot-binding, a tradition among the elite and aspiring classes, was a mark of beauty and status. But it also broke bones and crippled mobility. Education is everything, especially for the sons of merchants or miners, officials who dream of rising through the imperial bureaucracy. The state exam system was the single path to social mobility, but it required years of memorizing texts so dense they seemed designed to break your mind before your spirit. Entire families would pool resources to fund one boy's chance at the exams, hoping he might one day pass the imperial tests and become a civil servant. It was a long shot. Fewer than 1% made it. Girls as young as 5 would have their toes bent inward, bound tightly with cloth, until their feet shrank to a golden lotus, ideally just 3 inches long. Your family would have to survive without you. Your crops might fail. Your children might go hungry. But refusing wasn't an option. Imperial China was an empire of infrastructure, and you were the workforce. There was no asking. The emperor's orders flowed downward through a hierarchy so vast and rigid, it made stone look soft. If you're lucky, your family still owns the land. If not, you're renting it from a local landowner, giving up half your harvest just for the right to stay on the soil your ancestors toiled for centuries to claim. There's no time to eat. Outside, the village stirs with quiet resignation. The roads aren't paved. They're dirt tracks hardened by 1,000 years of footsteps and you pass the village well, already surrounded by women in thick robes, buckets swinging at their sides. Their chatter is low and cautious words travel quickly, and so do rumors. You begin your day with the fields, but the work isn't just farming. The taxes were paid in grain, but also in labor. One day, you might be working alongside soldiers not by choice, but because there's a rebellion brewing in a neighboring province. And yet, you believe in the system. You believe in the mandate of heaven, the idea that the emperor rules, not by brute force, but by cosmic will. Now imagine you are not a peasant, but a woman. The expectations change, but the burdens remain. If you are lucky, your feet haven't yet been bound. Your life revolves around obedience, first to your father, then to your husband, and finally to your son. But power exists quietly. Mothers-in-law rule households with iron discretion. Even children aren't spared. Boys are drilled in Confucian classics from the moment they can sit upright. And for that chance, the family might endure hunger. Even rest isn't restful. The emperor, of course, lived in an entirely different universe. You go to sleep exhausted, but sleep is not guaranteed. And you dream if you can have a life where your days are your own. Your stomach is full, and your back is unbroken. You thought the fields were hard. You thought your aching spine and calloused hands were the limits of hardship, but those were just the physical trials. In Imperial China, survival wasn't only about labor, it was about navigating an enormous, ancient machine, one greased with rules, rituals, taxes, and the crushing weight of hierarchy. Let's say for a moment you aren't a peasant. Let's say your father was a grain merchant in a medium-sized town. Perhaps you've studied enough Confucian texts to earn a place in the county school. Not because you love it, but because the alternative is slipping back into the chaos of the lower classes. You've seen what happens when a merchant falls out of favor, or a flood destroys a harvest. You're a cog in a machine too old to change, and too vast to grasp. Your days are spent measuring land, calculating tax grain, listening to peasants' disputes over irrigation, ditches, and inheritance lines. Slip a coin under the table. Even idealistic officials often succumb because the system rewards compliance more than conscience. The bureaucratic class is a lifeline, and everyone is clawing toward it. Step outside your social class, speak too boldly, or misread the nuances of etiquette, and your reputation collapses. In some dynasties, an ill-timed word in front of the wrong nobleman could result in exile or execution. You monitor markets, report bandit activity, and settle village quarrels. He alone could perform the rituals that maintained balance between heaven and earth. Disasters were signs that the emperor had lost heaven's favor. That's when rumors began to spread. Rebels stirred, sects formed. Dynasties died this way. You had to calculate every word, every movement. Was your neighbor's kindness genuine? Or was he positioning for your land? Was that tax collector writing down your yield truthfully? Or taking a cut for himself? Was the scholar at the tea house a poetor? Each year, he conducted sacrifices at the Temple of Heaven in Beijing, asking for good harvests and cosmic harmony. If your wife's father died, you might need to leave your job and mourn for 3 years. Failing to do so marked you as unfilial. You are responsible for thousands of lives, but your resources are laughably small. There were rules for how to dress, how to speak, how to write, how to mourn, how to bathe, how to pray, and how to die. And while some found stability in the order, many were crushed by its weight. One drought, one locust swarm, one corrupt colleague, and your entire district might fall apart, and the blame will fall on you. You have a brush, inkstone, and worn wooden desk. A single household might include 3 generations, a dozen trades, and 4 belief systems. Art and poetry, new farming techniques spread. Salt merchants became millionaires. Paper money was invented. You could wear robes with embroidered dragon motifs and wield authority over local matters. But the odds were laughabout times. Fewer than 1 in 300 test takers succeeded. Thinking about how many rules govern your day, how many eyes are watching, how much effort it takes to maintain your place in the world. They monitored officials, scholars, generals, even the emperor's relatives. It's late. No one visits this hour. If you were accused of disloyalty, no trial was needed. Torture was common. Confessions were expected. Shrines and temples were everywhere. Offerings of incense, jars, paper, and fruit were daily affairs. People prayed to city gods, kitchen gods, ancestral spirits, and wandering deities with specialized powers. But religion wasn't a refuge from the state. It was intertwined with it. Your days are no less grueling than a laborer's Zuer battles fought with paper and memory. The imperial examination system was one of the most brutal meritocracies ever invented. Created during the Sui dynasty and refined through the Tang and Song eras, it continued well into the Qing. It promised advancement to those who could master Confucian classics, write elegant poetry, and memorize lengthy essays. But don't be fooled, this was no modern open access system. The exams were hard, punishing, and emotionally crushing. Candidates would travel for days to reach an exam hall, bringing food, bedding, and ink. They were locked inside tiny wooden cubicles for several days. Some went mad from the isolation. Others cheated by sewing miniature scrolls into their robes. Punishments for dishonesty included public floggings or exile. The dream was clear. Become a jinchi, a presented scholar, and you could rise to Still, you'll study. Now imagine you do succeed. You pass the local exam, then the provincial. Then, finally, you're summoned to the capital for the palace exam. You pass that too. Your name is engraved on a stone stele. Your family weeps with joy. You're granted a post in a rural province. You pack your belongings, bow to your ancestors, and mount a horse headed for your first appointment. But what awaits you isn't power. It's paperwork, endless scrolls, ledgers, registers. You write memorials to the emperor, which must follow rigid formats and echo Confucian morality. Corruption is everywhere. Bribes are not just common, they're expected. Want a better posting? Pay someone. Want your case heard by a higher magistrate? Meanwhile, back in the city, a simple misstep could ruin your life. And let's not forget the spies. During the Ming Dynasty, the Eastern Depot and Western Depot secret police organizations, run by eunuchs, were tasked with uncovering treason. What about religion? Surely that offered some comfort. Sort of. Religion in Imperial China wasn't singular art. Was a blend of Confucian philosophy, Taoist mysticism, and Buddhist cosmology. The emperor himself was the son of heaven. His role was not just political, but cosmic. If your town was hit by famine or flood, people didn't just blame the weather, they blamed the dynasty. You see, it was indeed just hard to survive in Imperial China. It was hard to know whom you could trust. Even joy had rules. Weddings had elaborate rituals. Funerals required prescribed mourning garments and timed weeping. Imperial China wasn't lawless, it was open. The strange thing is, people endured. Not just endured, they adapted, innovated, even thrived within the cracks of the system. And still, the machine churned on. You lie in bed, exhausted, not from farming this time, but from thinking. And then you hear a knock at the door. The knock comes again harder. Who would disturb a quiet household in the middle of the night? The knock comes again, this time sharper, more urgent. You rise, trembling slightly. A dozen thoughts crowd your mind. Did your son say something foolish at the... Did a neighbor report you for hoarding grain? A stern-faced man stands before you in dark robes, an official's runner. Not a soldier. Worse, he hands you a summons scroll. The ink is wet from humidity. You've been called to answer a charge. Or perhaps the magistrate's assistant miscounted your tax payment and believes you still owe. In the morning, you'll go in Imperial China. A knock at the wrong hour could mean ruin. It had eyes, many eyes, and often they were bloodshot with exhaustion, corruption, or vengeance. The legal code, especially during the Tang and Qing dynasties, was vast and detailed. Crimes and punishments were categorized into 5 levels, from beatings to beheadings. You refuse. The constables bring out the jiao, shinkta, small punishment tools, slaps with bamboo strips, finger presses with wooden dowels, ankles crushed in a wooden frame, and punishments were public meant to instruct, to instill fear, and to enforce harmony by making examples. Your breath is ragged, penal labor included, mining sulfur or digging canals, both backbreaking and often fatal. Survivors returned, change bents, sick and poorer than before. Judgment is passed. Public beating and 3 months of hard labor repairing the flood dike. Elders told stories under moonlight. Grandparents handed down herbal wisdom. Children fished in rivers after harvests. People celebrated Mid-Autumn and New Year with lanterns and sticky rice cakes. They prayed to the kitchen god before every meal. Joy crept in, not through grand freedoms, but through small, defiant acts of living. You bow again, thanking the magistrate for his mercy. For over 2,000 years, dynasties rose and fell. But the civilization continued. It absorbed conquerors, healed from rebellions, and rebuilt cities flattened by earthquakes and invasions. The machine groaned, but never fully stopped. Your arms go numb, but even within those, there were tattooing the face with ink, castration, or death by strangulation, or decapitation. Your children stare at you half proud, half afraid. Your neighbor won't meet your eye. Your wife says nothing, just places a bowl of soup in front of you. Her hand steady. You open the wooden door. Lantern light flickers in the night wind. You don't argue. You bow and accept the parchment with both hands, fingers trembling. Justice in Imperial China wasn't blind. Confucian order required everyone to know their place and behave accordingly. The family, not the individual, was the core unit. If one member disgraced the name, the entire clan could suffer. The condemned would be tied to a frame, and a state executioner would slowly cut flesh from the body until death came, or until mercy was purchased with bribes for a quicker end. It was designed not just to kill, but to destroy the body's dignity, to deny the soul peace, and to terrify the witnesses into obedience. You arrive at the Yaminda County office and courthouse. The courtyard is filled with others awaiting their turn. A beggar was caught stealing rice. A merchant accused of cheating waits. Beneath him, clerks, assistants, scribes, and constables with bamboo rods. No lawyers, no defense attorneys. You must plead your case yourself, and it better align with proper ritual respect. A mother-in-law in a dispute with her daughter. Everyone waits under the same sun. You are accused of falsifying your grain yield to avoid tax. You deny it, but the tax registrar says otherwise. He's backed by 2 fellow clerks who nods. You realize, then you are being framed. Perhaps for spite, perhaps to meet a quota, perhaps because someone paid them to ensure your punishment. The magistrate sits elevated behind a wooden desk. His hat bears the signature wings of authority. You kneel, you bow, you present your side, and now it's your word against theirs. So they bring out the instruments. In Imperial China, confessions weren't just encouraged, they were required. The assumption was simple. Truth comes from suffering. You are told to confess. You scream and still deny. Eventually, you break. You confess. The magistrate, satisfied, writes your statement in formal script. You sign it with a thumbprint in red ink. This is mercy. Let's say your crime had been worse, say, sedition, or striking a superior, or theft during famine. You'd face harsher punishments. There were 5 main types: Ji, Liu, and Si. One punishment, used only for the worst traitors, was linky death by 1,000 cuts. It wasn't just execution, it was a spectacle. But even lesser punishments carried their own burdens. Exile often meant being sent to the farthest provinces, places with bandits, wild animals, or rebellious minorities. Yet the system saw this as justice. Harmony was more important than individual truth. And yet, people endured. Even within this web of fear and control, families thrived. Communities cared for each other. Maybe that's the strangest thing about Imperial China. It worked, and yet, the next morning, after your sentence is announced, you return home. You sip, thinking of the dike you'll be repairing, the river it must contain, and the weight of all that unspoken water pressing against its walls, just like the Empire. Endless, powerful, beautiful, terrifying, and somehow, still standing. The air inside your study is stifling heavy, with the scent of ink, candle wax, and dust that never quite settles. It's barely dawn, but you've already been awake for hours. You light a fresh stick of incense and begin your morning ritual, bowing 3 times to the household shrine, murmuring a verse from the Analects, and straightening the folds of your dark silk robe. Today, like every day, you must appear composed, balanced in both body and mind. You are a Ming Dynasty civil servant, a functionary in one of the most vast and labyrinthine bureaucracies the world has ever seen. There are land records to inspect, tax quotas to enforce, local disputes to mediate, and a sea of imperial edicts to interpret. You suspect poor workmanship. Either way, you must submit a formal memorial to request funds for repair. That process could take weeks or months, depending on whether someone in Nanjing misplaces the request or decides it docent T rank high enough in priority. A group of peasants gather at the magistrate's gate with a petition. One man's crops have been swallowed by the river after a local landlord redirected water for his own fields. The man kneels in the mud, weeping, a sheaf of documents tied with string in his calloused hands. His family will starve if this isn't resolved. Each morning, you receive reports from village headmen and tax collectors. Rice shipments are delayed. Your assistant writes the man's name into the register, and the crowd parts slowly, murmuring. They will wait for an answer. Walk the narrow path to your lodging's modest courtyard house with crumbling roof tiles and a garden choked with weeds. Your wife greets you silently. It bears the red wax seal of the Ministry of Personnel. She knows better than to ask about your day. You eat cold noodles, reheated from the morning. They're sticky, bland, and oddly metallic. You chew slowly. That answer could take weeks, or it could be buried under a stack of other, louder problems. You remember vomiting from anxiety, then passing out before sunrise, ink smeared on your sleeve. All for this. A chance to serve, to matter, to bring order from chaos. Effective immediately. Your replacement is already on his way. Tempers are rising. The landlord you were preparing to investigate, all of it gone in a wax-sealed sentence. Bandits might exploit the disruption. Each document must be logged, summarized, copied twice, sealed, and forwarded to your superior in. You stare at its shadow on the wall, small, frantic, always fluttering, toward heat that will kill it. Your father ran a modest shop selling paper, brushes, and inkstones in Suzhou, and it was your mother who insisted you pursue the exams. She cooked millet late into the night while you recited Confucian lines under a flickering oil lamp. Pursuing the case could damage your standing, invite political retaliation, but ignoring it will send a message that justice is only for those who can afford it. You remember your older brother failing the counter-level exam 3 times. When he gave up, it fell on you. It is not glamorous. Your office is a squat stone building with flaking plaster. The people demand justice. The region demands food, water, roads, schools, safety, and you are the man in the middle with a brush and limited power, teetering record shelves, and an infestation of mice that no amount of trapping seems to stop. You have 3 assistants, 2 unreliable runners, and a clerk who drinks vinegar wine when no one's looking. You weren't born into wealth. You've earned the Jinji degree presented scholar, and your name is carved into a monument stone. You have become part of the elite, chosen by knowledge, shaped by discipline. Now, years later, you've passed, but it's nothing like you imagined. You serve in a prefectural office, deep in Jiangxi province. Your work is relentless. A single ink blot, a stray stroke, and a superior might dismiss Your entire report sloppiness is not tolerated. Accuracy, even in tedium, is virtue. Everything is written in regulated script cashew with strict formatting. You adjust your brush and begin the first scroll of the day. An update on a collapsed bridge near the Eastern Canal. The engineer blames unseasonal rains. That bridge served 5 villages. You sip cold tea and keep writing. Outside, the sun climbs lazily. You know this landlord. He's powerful, wealthy, with connections to a provincial governor. You accept the petition, nodding solemnly. This is the heart of your burden. You thought success meant influence, even comfort. But in reality, you are sandwiched between imperial expectations and local desperation. The emperor demands order. You think back to the exam hall, the tiny stone cell, the candlelit hours, the 3-day ordeal. You wonder sometimes if it was worth it. In the evening, there's a letter on your desk. It arrived by courier while you were out. You break it open. It's a transfer order. You've been reassigned to a flood-prone district 200 li south. You'll leave behind the people you just began to understand, the problems you finally learned to navigate. You close the letter and set it aside. A moth buzzes against the paper lantern. You wonder, is this what the system was always designed to do? Burn the brightest minds in slow, silent ways. The journey to your new post begins before sunrise. As most things in the Empire seem to, your belongings are loaded into a simple wooden cart. New banners, new entourage. You are not a provincial governor. You are a middle-tier administrator with a satchel full of documents and a badge of rank sewn into your robe. Your new yeoman is smaller than your last one. The gate sags slightly, and the tiles on the roof have moss growing in their cracks. The staff here are wary, watching you like you're a storm cloud. An entire hamlet, you learn, has been relocated twice in the past decade. It now sits on stilts like a spider's nest above the muck. And that, for most of the empire, is enough authority to be both feared and The road south is muddy, lined with willows that lean like tired shoulders over the canal. He'd been submitting exaggerated dike restoration reports, backed by forged receipts. The surplus funds, gone. Your assistant finds a ledger hidden behind a false back in the archive shelf, filled with coded notations and private seal impressions. You do not accuse anyone by name, but the implication is clear. His message is ... non-committal. He thanks you for the diligence and encourages further quiet investigation. No mention of action. You're left holding the brush. If the flooding worsens, it's not your fault. It's a mess handed down. One hasn't been updated in 4 years. And then it clicks. You pass oxen with bowed heads, children herding ducks, and monks carrying small wooden drums on pilgrimage. Not properly. Your vision blurs slightly. When you look at small script, you pace, write, erase, write again. Every hour brings a new question. If the grain shipment doesn't arrive in time, who will you ration first, elders or children? They form chains, lifting baskets of stone and sand to repair the breach. No one is arguing. You describe the villagers' resilience, their organization, their efficiency despite lack of funds. You subtly contrast it with the absence of prior oversight. You request retroactive disaster relief and promise to send updated tax projections after the harvest. No one is waiting for instructions. The local Buddhist monks are handing out boiled roots. A woman you don't know offers you a sweet potato. You sleep in guest rooms and official inns, their walls painted with old imperial slogans that have faded with time. Serve the people, one says. Another, heaven watches the honest. The Grand Canal may have been a triumph of engineering, but it was also a delicate artery, easily choked by silt and seasonal rains. And here in Xingyuan, 2 tributaries of the Huayi River merge and sometimes overflow. Frogs cling to rooftops. You send urgent missives requesting emergency grain shipments. You wade ankle deep through town to the supply storehouses, only to find that several records said they were full. The corruption runs deeper than you thought. You receive panicked letters, scribbled on soaked parchment, handed to you by runners. drenched to the bone. One district reports that their ancestral temple has floated away. Bamboo scaffolds line the edges, where villagers are trying to reinforce the smell of rot is heavy in the air. Rice is moved to higher storerooms, but on the third night, the northern embankment collapses. Not a full breach, just a leak, but leaks in this region are like rumors. They grow fast. Your boots sink into the soil. A boy stands knee-deep in mud, pulling waterlogged branches with his bare hands. His mother yells at him to be careful. Snakes nest in the reeds. You don't know whether to be comforted or unnerved. After 4 days, you arrive at your new district. It is flat, damp, and prone to flooding. The air tastes of mildew. You learn quickly why you were sent here. The river is misbehaving. The Ming Dynasty, despite its centralized strength, struggled to tame the empire's waters. Flood control was a never-ending concern. In the first week, you received 3 reports of damaged dikes and 5 complaints about rising groundwater levels. You walk the banks of the river with your assistant. You ask the local headman how often this happens. He chuckles bitterly. Too often for the emperor to care. That night, you study the old hydrological map filled with winding ink strokes that trace the curves of rivers as they were drawn decades ago. The previous administrator, your predecessor, was pocketing the funds meant for flood repairs, and now you've inherited the consequences. You file a report to the provincial governor. It's cautious, measured. The governor replies a week later, and then the storm comes. Rain falls for 3 days. At first, the river swells slowly. The villagers seem prepared. Sandbags are piled. By morning, entire paddies are submerged. You mobilize workers. You don't sleep that night. By dawn, you feel older. Your hands shake, but the rain stops. Finally, and when you go to inspect the damage the next day, something remarkable happens. The villagers, hundreds of them, are already there. They aren't waiting for the empire. They're fixing it themselves. That evening, back at your desk, you write another memorial to the Ministry of Works. You choose your words carefully. You seal the scroll and hand it to the courier. He bows and disappears into the night. You watch him go, knowing full well that your report may be ignored. But still you wrote it. You did what you could. You sit down, fingers stained with ink, and wonder. A month has passed since the storm. The waters receded, leaving behind slick mud, collapsed footpaths, and paddies blanketed in silt. The scent of rot hangs in the air, and flies swarm over everything. But still, the people endure. Reports on missing grain, reports on the villagers who died, reports on the villagers who survived, each written with the same careful brushstrokes, folded along creases taught to you by your mentors, sealed with wax and bound in twine. And yet, you suspect many of them will be skimmed if read, and all by men in silk who've never stood knee-deep in floodwater, or watched a child's body float past a breached dike. Rebuilding begins. Families shovel earth from ruined doorways. Shrines are lit. Children splash in puddles too wide to drain. They wave when they see you. You know your accounts are honest, but honesty doesn't always matter in politics. The junior censor questions you about your predecessor, the missing dike funds, the ghost employees, the falsified storage records. You answer with care. You've seen good men demoted for small arithmetic errors. You've also seen charlatans promoted for knowing the right cousin of a Minister S, Uncle S, wife. He says the Emperor through channels, of course, has acknowledged your integrity. You nod in return, careful not to appear moved. You speak the expected words of humility and thanks. But inside, a quiet storm brews. The bureaucracy, like the river, simply flows on, muddy, slow, but impossible to stop. A place where your words might echo a little louder in court. You've spent the last 2 weeks writing reports on infrastructure damage, but you write them anyway. That is your duty. The villagers bring offerings, tea, dried fish, even a small scroll with a hand-drawn map of the riverbanks annotated with local knowledge. No government record contains. You thank them all, promising that your successor will receive your notes. The real virtue ISNT, calligraphy or quoting Mencius it. S. Staying upright while the whole system leans on you. You've been trained to see the brush as your sword. You serve the dynasty with ink and protocol, with proper seals and Confucian but the truth gnaws at you now more than ever. A brush doesn't dam a river. It doesn't feed a village. It doesn't stop corruption. For the first time in a long while, it feels like you recognize the man staring back. You visit the northern levee again. His spine is crooked, his hands blistered. He offers you a bundle of green onions. You try to refuse, but he insists. His eyes are clear, honest. Frogs chirp. Somewhere in the distance, a bamboo flute plays a mournful tune. Probably a farmhand or a fisherman keeping vigil. More refined. Your office will have walls painted with cherry blossoms. The files will be organized. The officials will quote poetry, but the burdens will be no lighter, only dressed in silk and wine. The villagers are working, still rebuilding, not just with state-issued supplies, but with bamboo mats, hand-woven rope, and stone hauled from distant quarries. One old man approaches. His retinue includes 2 junior clerks and a Lorencan scissorate officer, men with clean fingernails and expressions that suggest they don't want to be here. They say you're not like the last one, he says. You pause, then take the onions, and bow deeply. That night, something strange happens. A traveling official from the Ministry of Works arrives unannounced. They ask to see your records, all of them. You comply. Though your chest tightens, they spend 3 days reviewing your ledgers. They speak in whispers. On the 4th day, the traveling official calls you into the main hall. He informs you that your actions during the flood have been noted. Your reports were thorough. Your response, commendable. Then, with a pause that seems designed to heighten drama, he tells you you've been promoted. Your next post will be in Suzhou Prefecture, nearer the coast. A richer region, a more visible one. You bow. Not joy, not pride. Something else. Exhaustion, or maybe disbelief. Your final week in Xinguan is bittersweet. You spend your last evening walking the dikes alone. The air smells of loam and night blossoms. You sit by the water's edge and stare at your reflection. In Suzhou, life will be different. You know now what they don't teach during the exams. That the bureaucracy T about brilliance, it S about, and so when you leave the village gates the next morning, you carry more than your scrolls and robes. You carry the silence of that flute, the weight of unspoken gratitude, and the memory of muddy water, slowly, patiently, rising. And you wonder. You were born in a fishing village, where the sky met the sea, with no ceremony. You remember the smell of salt, the sound of gulls, your mother's soft humming as she twisted nets in the evenings. You took the coins, and you were taken. You were the 4th son. There wasn't enough rice to go around. Your mind blurred the moment when they cut. It is a place where footsteps echo across tile courtyards and vermilion gates, swing only for ritual. Behind those red walls, over 70,000 eunuchs, once served, moving through hidden passageways, living their entire lives in shadows present but never visible. You screamed until your voice cracked. You wake before the sun and carry baskets of embroidered robes soaked in sweat and ceremonial incense. You scrub gently, carefully. You're literate. You write clean, formal script. You summarize edicts. Who speaks before whom? Who pretends to hold power? And who actually does? You stamp documents with imperial seals. Your hands grow more ink-stained than calloused. Above you are men like Wang Zan, Lu Jin, and Wei Zhongzhen, known across the empire. Eunuchs who began like you, but rose to control armies, issue decrees, even dictate emperors' daily routines. You memorize the faces of ministers you'll never speak to, the names of concubines who command more power than generals. Their stories are whispered at night, among bunk mats and flickering lanterns. You mimic your superiors. You are no longer the child who scrubbed royal undergarments. You now serve in the Hall of Celestial Purity, one of the Emperor's personal quarters. You light incense before dawn. ensure scrolls are arranged in correct order, and greet envoys with rehearsed grace. You bow more deeply. You compose letters with careful flattery, and slowly you ascend. You do not ask questions. You do not linger. You're reassigned to the Internal Documents Bureau, avoiding tears and fabric that cost more than your village's entire yearly harvest. You've read its phrasing. You know that someone in the imperial family is to be relocated. Quietly, you bow to everyone, even other eunuchs who outrank you. You are invisible. The wound festered, you burned with fever. You've delivered memorials to his private reading chamber. You've tasted soup before it reached his bowl, ensuring it wasn't poisoned. He praises your script work. He gives you a sealed scroll. No one else is to read it, not even the ministers. For days, you lay on a straw mat, drifting between worlds. Eunuchs without rank are expendable. A broken vase, a spilled dish, a wrong glance any of it can end you. And so, when the recruiter came, a man in robes with silk thread embroidery, and a purse of copper coins, your father made a decision. He signed the paper. You were 7 years old. The journey to the capital was long, and the pain that followed was worse. You don't remember all of it? When you finally stood again, you were no longer a boy. You were no longer anything. Not fully man. Not quite child. You're a filter between the Emperor and the world. You had no future, only a role. The way officials frown before entering the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The exact moment each bell chimes in the Hall of Mental Cultivation. You had become a eunuch of the Ming Imperial Court. The Forbidden City is a world within walls vast, gilded, symmetrical, and endlessly silent. At first, you are assigned to the Laundry Bureau, a lowly posting. But you are also watching, listening, memorizing. You notice the rhythm of the palace, the way palace maids disappear down certain hallways at dawn, and then one day you're summoned. The eunuch registry office has noticed your efficiency. There, among scrolls and silence, your life begins to shift. You copy palace memos. You learn who bows to whom. You also learn what not to say. The eunuch hierarchy is steep, and its ladder is made of whispers. But there is danger in every step upward. Many eunuchs who rose too quickly were accused of treason, corruption, or overstepping heaven's boundary. Heads rolled, limbs were displayed on gates. Still, you want to rise, not for glory but for safety. So you study harder. Years pass. You have never seen the Emperor's face, not directly, but you've heard his voice. You've seen his silhouette behind sill screens. You're not just a servant, but you are also a paradox. Close to the throne, yet never allowed to sit. One afternoon, a high-ranking eunuch, a man who once helped orchestrate a minister's dismissal, summons you. He knows your name. You deliver it as instructed directly to the Emperor's physician. But now, you know things. You've seen the seal of a secret edict. You say nothing. But that night, you do not sleep. You stare at the ceiling, wondering. You are older now. Not in years, your body remains trim. Your hair still black, but in ways that have nothing to do with time. Years in the Forbidden City age. A man differently. You become attuned to nuance, to the weight of silence, to the importance of how long a person waits before answering a question. You've learned that secrets can be more lethal than swords and far more valuable. Since delivering the sealed scroll, your position has quietly shifted. You've not been promoted, nothing so overt, but invitations arrive more frequently. You are asked to sit closer in morning briefings. You are occasionally addressed by name, and once, during an audience, a prince glances at you, then says nothing. No seal. Just your name and a time. The 7th watch of the night. That glance, you know, is more dangerous than any command. You've become what many eunuchs aspire to. A trusted intermediary. Not powerful in your own right, but essential. Says little, but he speaks your name. Says it with intent. Then he speaks the name of the Emperor's second son. A hinge on a great palace door. And that is a dangerous place to be. You begin to hear rumors of a rift in the court. The Emperor is aging. His sons are maneuvering. One is favored by the Empress, another by the military, a third by foreign-tied ministers. Each has allies both official and silent. You are drawn into it by accident, or perhaps by design. You burn incense. You clean your ink. You recite passages from the Book of Rites as you copy inventory orders for the kitchens. But neutrality in the Forbidden City is a dangerous illusion. Everyone is a tool, a channel, or a threat. A folded note appears beneath your desk scroll. When you ask, you're told he's been transferred to a northern post. You know that means prison. You arrive at the appointed corridor. It's empty. Then, a voice quiet, clipped, familiar. One of the junior ministers. You nod, though you're unsure if it's advice or accusation. He offers you tea in a plain clay cup. Then into the inner palace, where only a few may tread. The Emperor sits behind a golden screen. You see only the silhouette of his crown and his sleeve as he waves you forward. Memorials from the Ministry of Personnel, and a red folder sealed in wax. He does not say what he wants, but you understand. Head down. You hold the scrolls high. He speaks, his voice soft, raspy, but controlled. He needs information, a whisper of what the Emperor has been reading, whose petitions he has refused, what medicines the physician has prescribed. You do not answer. You bow, slowly. Then you leave. The next day, the physician's assistant brings you a basket of pears, selecting the proper wording to reflect loyalty, filial piety, and reverence for the dynasty. You are no longer simply a messenger. You are part of the nervous system of the palace. You begin organizing schedules for ceremonial rituals to clothe the empire's cracks in silk and ritual. You coordinate visits from foreign and you make arrangements for banquets that you will never taste, conversations you will never be part of. He says it's from the Emperor's table. You slice one open. Inside, there's a strip of silk, tightly rolled. It contains the seal of the Eastern Depot, Imperial Secret Police, a message, encoded but clear. We are watching. You oversee the arrangements, robes, music, incense, prayers. You eat the pear anyway. Slowly, deliberately. You've entered a web with no exit. You try to remain neutral. You notice a servant you've worked with for years no longer shows up for evening rounds. Another unicolor, with trembling hands, warns you in passing. Don't be too useful. One afternoon, the Emperor calls for a private audience. You're not summoned directly, but you're told to bring Scroll's medical reports. You walk through the outer court, past the Hall of Supreme Harmony. You kneel. Do you read them? He asks. You pause. The wrong answer is death. Only what is necessary. Your Majesty. There is silence. Then a sigh. Everything is necessary. He says nothing more. You leave. Heart hammering. You realize he knows. Not just about you, but about everything. And he allows it. From then on, your presence is requested more often. One day, a message arrives. A cousin of the Emperor has died. The funeral rites must be prepared with full honors. But the cousin did not die of illness. He fell from a tower. Some say suicide. Others, punishment. You do not ask. You simply nod and prepare the ceremonial scrolls. It is your role to smooth over the chaos. But at night, when the palace is quiet and the halls echo with the wind, you wonder. By now, you have served through 3 winters. The peach blossoms have bloomed and withered again in the inner gardens. The palace has grown quieter, more brittle. There is a stillness now and anticipation that moves like fog beneath the corridors. You can feel it in the hushed tones of ministers, in the stiff posture of guards, in the way even the kitchen servants chop radish more slowly, as if fearing the noise. The Emperor is ill. Everyone knows it, but no one says it aloud. The imperial physician comes and goes with guarded expressions. Petitions accumulate without reply, and you once the silent errand. You unfold the petitions. You prepare his medicine, ginseng, and things no commoner could afford in a lifetime. You say nothing, even as you watch the most powerful man in the world shrink into his silken robes. Runner now. Find yourself one of the few who can cross the threshold of the Emperor's private chamber. You light the incense. By the depot, by the princes and their allies. Each faction waits to see what the Emperor will do, because you, the quiet eunuch who was once a laundry boy, now hold keys. Not metaphorical ones, real ones. Not sealed with a mark, just folded and left, where it will be found by the right person. The courtyard lantern flickers in the evening breeze. A bird flutters past the rooftops. Somewhere, deep in the belly of the city, a gong sounds. You sit down, dip your brush in ink, and begin writing. No proclamation is made, but the gates are tight, scribes are recalled. His voice is hoarse as he addresses the assembled officials. He names the second prince heir. He thanks the ministers. He praises the ancestors. The Imperial Guard doubles its patrols. Eunuchs whisper behind sleeves. Courtiers pretend not to know what they know. Iron and brass. Keys to document boxers. 2 memorial chests. 2 sealed doors and shadowed rooms. You are also being watched. Not in death, but in an act that sends a signal across the empire. The order of succession is decided by the censors. Another is placed under health watch by the physician's office. His beard is white, but his eyes are sharp. His words are slow, carefully wrapped in Confucian phrasing. He speaks of harmony, of duty, a new robe, access to new corridors. People bow more deeply now. You never dreamed of influence, and yet here you are, an orphaned fisher boy, now able to unmake a minister with a word, withhold an edict with a glance, and let your mind drift. Some smile, some sneer, of the empire's future. The rooms are warmer, but the chains, you bow. Not when you can never marry, never leave, never own property, never speak your mind without wrapping it in 10 layers of metaphor. You light incense, you do your work, and in the Forbidden City, a key is a weapon. You are summoned to an audience with the Grand Secretary. He is not young. Then, without shifting his gaze, he mentions the second prince, and again, without naming it directly, he speaks of you, your influence, your proximity, your usefulness, he says. The reed bends with the wind, not from weakness, but wisdom. You leave the meeting with the understanding that silence is no longer an option. To do nothing is to choose. You return to your quarters, not a report, not a ledger, a letter, not signed with your name. The next day, the Emperor does not rise. The inner court descends into a kind of frozen panic. Then, just before dusk, the red silk curtain is drawn open. The Emperor, pale and gaunt, appears in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. He walks with help, but he walks. And he steps down, not an abdication. And the next morning, 2 officials are removed, quietly. One prince is sent to a governorship in a distant province. No trial, no exile, just disappearance. And you are promoted, a new title. You smile back, as always, but at night, when the lanterns are out and the stars hang cold over the courtyards, you sit in the dark and wonder. You never ask for power, but you also know the truth that power hides. You are still not free. Not really. Not when your status still hinges on royal favor. The robes are finer. They are just silk now. And so, you breathe in the incense. You think of your mother's hands tying fishing nets, of salt on your tongue, of laughter, before you knew what ambition tasted like. And you ask yourself, was this rise worth what you lost? Or, more quietly, what would you become if you could ever stop climbing? You are not a general. You are not a minister. You are not even a scholar. You are a rice transport overseer man with a clipboard, a wax seal, and an uneasy stomach. And yet, your job carries the fate of thousands. Not death. You bring some to your nose and recoil. The stench is unmistakable. Mold. Because in Imperial China, if rice doesn't move, nothing else does. You stand on a weathered dock in Yangzhou to make sure none of that food rots in transit. Spoiled. staring at a barge that should have left 5 days ago. The canal water is brown, sluggish. Ducks paddle in lazy circles near the pylons. You had hoped for something more. Refined, maybe clerical work in a tax office. Or even assisting in temple registry maintenance. A man of modest background doesn't argue with fortune, but logistics. Rice barges. You walk to the stern, where the barge master waits. He bows, but not deeply. He knows the dance. Filthy docks. On board the grain boat. Sacks of government rice are stacked neatly, sealed with stamped slips. Everything appears orderly, but you know better. They're neat. Neat, moldy, bug-ridden. The ink is still wet in places. Someone has rewritten them recently. You climb aboard, slice open the twine of one bag, and plunge your hand inside. The grains are wet. If you lie, and the rice makes it to Linji or Tongju, and someone there discovers the spoilage, you'll be the one accused of fraud. And just like that, you understand this shipment is ruined. 3,000 den of rice, enough to feed a garrison for a month. The Grand Canal is the spine of the empire. The walls are thin. You hear the boatmen drinking below, laughing, telling stories. You wonder if they're laughing at you. Built and expanded over centuries. From the Sui to the Yuan and perfected by the Ming, it stretches over 1,100 miles, connecting the fertile southern provinces to the hungry mouths of the north. Beijing depends on it. The army depends on it. Even the emperor's court kitchens depend on it. And your job, which, clearly, is easier said than done. You were appointed to this post by a regional official who owed your cousin a favor. You learned that some boat captains dilute the weight of their rice shipments by mixing in sand, husks, or even dried peas. Not well. It has the direct order from a senior logistics commissioner in Kafang. There rest, unrest near the northern garrisons. Rice is needed immediately. Your shipment must depart within 24 hours. No exceptions. This is how it works. Rot is passed down the river like a hot coal. No one wants to be the one holding it when it burns. The thought of moldy rice festering in government storehouses 100 li from now clings to your thoughts. You learn that government sacks sometimes get switched, with private stock Midjourney then switched. Back before arrival, you accept it anyway. One threatens to report you for insubordination. You tell them to do it loudly. You make sure the entire dock hears. If they report you for refusing to send spoiled rice, you win either way. You're honest, or you're scapegoated with honor. You learn quickly. You learned how bribes flow. Small ones to expedite inspections, larger ones to overlook mold. You attach samples of the spoiled rice, sealed in wax. You copy the logbook in your own hand, marking inconsistencies. Every step of the journey invites corruption, and every failure in your job means delays, fines, or worse, hunger. A barge floats, byloaded with firewood, not rice. A child stands on its prow, waving. Now, this shipment is ruined. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Rain came early. Storage shed leaked. You inspect the shipping logs. You say nothing. Not yet. Instead, you order the rest of the cargo to be checked. Your assistants open more sacks. Some are fine. It's a disaster, disguised as competence. You'll have to file a report with the Canal Transport Bureau. And if you're honest, heads will roll, including yours. There's no winning here, just degrees of blame. You retired to your lodgings that night with a headache. The room is above a tea. You unroll a blank report, scroll and stare at it for a long time. Then you begin to write. Not a complaint, not an accusation, just the facts. The rain, the late partial spoilage, the resealed sacks, need for inspection. You write carefully, enough to alert attention without calling for blood. You seal the scroll with your chop and hand it to a runner. You don't sleep. The next morning, a courier from the Canal military office arrives. He doesn't speak much, just hands you a red-sealed packet. You stare at the letter. They don't know the rice is spoiled, or worse, they do, and want it shipped anyway. You crumple the edge of the scroll in your hand. You walk out onto the dock. The boat crew waits. The sacks remain loaded. You make a choice. You order the crew to unload every bag. Some protests. By midday, the dock is lined with damp, smelly sacks of grain. You draft a second scroll, this one firmer. You name the captain. You sign your name in full. Then you send it to You watch the runner go, then sit back on the edge of the pier. The canal water laps against the stone. You do not wave back. You think. If the empire runs on rice and the rice is always rotting, what does that say about everything else? It takes 3 days for the reply to arrive. You've spent those 3 days in tension, waiting for boots at your door. But instead of censure, you receive a wax-sealed scroll from the Kaifeng logistics of your... It is short, polite, punctuated with praise. Your swift action prevented broader waste. You are thanked, commended, told your warning helped divert future shipments through safer routes. Your diligence in record-keeping has been noted. It says it's a relief, and yet it doesn't feel like victory. You ask yourself, what happened to the barge captain? The boat crew, were they reassigned? Arrested? Fined? The reply makes no mention. The system doesn't resolve it. Simply You ask about rainfall protections. He points to the roof and mutters something about a repair request. You are told to prepare the next shipment immediately, because hunger does not wait. This time, you visit the rice warehouse yourself. It's a low building at the edge of town, near the canal's eastern inlet. Thick iron-studded doors. A government guard at the entrance, who barely looks up as you pass. Slow as turtles. North toward Lynching Dijon. And finally, Tangju, near Bajun, where the court waits, where the garrisons count every meal, where famine means rebellion and rebellion means blood. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of husks and rodent droppings, and that kind of distance fosters rot not just of rice, but of integrity. An old man with a broken flute and a voice like worn paper. He tells a tale from the Temps dynasty about a clever minister who caught a corrupt rice merchant by disguising himself as a boatman. You, pretending that each report matters, you find the storage ledgers stacked in a lacquered cabinet, poorly organized. The ink is smudged, dates don't match. Yes, but only when every link in the chain decides not to fail that day. One leak, one rotten sack, one lazy clerk, and the whole machine backs up until the garrison goes hungry and someone sends a rider with red ink and bad news. A pageant of efficiency held together with brushstrokes, seals, and fear. Some entries appear to have been erased and rewritten with a different hand, but signed by a clerk who Chekin died last season. Boat after boat pushes off down the canal, stacked high with hope and grain. A warehouse supervisor greets you with forced courtesy. You ask about pest control. He gestures vaguely to a few broken traps. How do you keep track of so many boats? It's not mismanagement. A city choked with warehouses, taxes, and the stink of water birds. You are assigned a new office. Bare, dusty, with ledgers stacked to the ceiling. It's apathy, because the rice isn't theirs. It belongs to the state, to someone else's stomach. Cite ancient precedents from the Joe Rights, folded with ceremony, and send it up the chain. You oversee the selection and loading yourself, no but to a station upstream, nearer to the supply origin points. More responsibility, better pay, closer to the bureaucratic heart of canal transport. You taste grain samples. You test moisture. You verify sack weights. Every barge is sealed in your presence, logged, stamped, and You work for 12 hours straight, sleeves rolled up, your brush worn thin. You watch them glide away. That night, you sit in the tea house again. There's a storyteller on the platform this time. The crowd chuckles. A few toss coins into his bowl. You sip your tea. Bitter, cooling fast. And you think about disguises, not the kind worn by clever ministers, but the ones everyone wears here. The duck hand pretending to care. The warehouse supervisor pretending to check. The truth is, Logistics in Imperial China is a theater. The rice moves. 2 weeks later, your efforts are recognized. A messenger arrives with a promotion letter not to Beijing. You pack your things without celebration. The canal doesn't change. It just curves. You arrive at your new post in Wyan. You open the first one and frown because the numbers don't make sense. Again, the logs show rice quotas that don't match local harvest yields. Several shipments are marked as inspected. It begins again. The same patterns. The same rot. One evening, a junior clerk asks you, half jokingly. You smile, faintly. You tell him, you don't follow the boats. You follow the lies. They float better than rice. He doesn't laugh, just nods, like he understands. Because he does. You write a new system proposal. Centralized warehouse audits. New moisture tracking guidelines. Quarterly surprise. Inspections. You draft it carefully. You never hear back. Weeks pass, but you do receive a new shipment, request twice the usual volume. You approve it. You do your job, because if you don't, someone else will. Probably worse. And still, at night you think, what is the cost of feeding the empire, if its own bones are always splintering beneath the weight? There's a phrase whispered among grain officials and transport clerks, though never written down in any edict. The empire eats first. It means exactly what it sounds like. When food is scarce, when boats go missing, when storms destroy half a harvest, the people don't get fed, the emperor's court does. The soldiers in Beijing do. The scribes, the guards, the gentry. You've been working the canal long enough now to see it for yourself. In your first month, at the Wyan post, you authorized over a dozen shipments. Upstream thousands of don of rice. But when a flood hit the lower provinces shortly after, and emergency rations were requested for local families, the reply from the capital was cold and quick. Storage insufficient. Recommend substitution with millet, which is another way of saying, one morning, you visit a village south of the canal, where a warehouse manager reported unusually low weights on incoming sacks. The clerk greets you with proper bows, correct forms, detailed logs. The scene is worse than you expected. Not dramatically less, just enough to slip through unnoticed if no one checks. Maybe a few pounds shaved here, a few sacks short there. But over a dozen shipments, it adds up to a village's survival. They can't survive on millet. Their rice paddies were swallowed by water weeks ago, and now they eat congee made from wild grass and boiled bark. A child pulls at your sleeve not to beg, but just to stare. You can't tell if the brown on his cheeks is dirt or dried broth. Quiet work, the kind the court values. The locals are gaunt. The warehouse itself is clean, organized. They tour the canal routes, check ledgers, compliment your orderly operation. The entry point for all grain shipments destined for the court. One of them, a man from Hangzhou, pats your shoulder, but the numbers don't add up. Each shipment arrives with less than it should. You take notes. You sign no accusations. Not yet. And wonder, what happens when you rise too high in a system you no longer believe in? You can authorize grain dispersals, delay shipments, even request new evaluations of storage stock. The trees are still bare. The canal is busy with vessels arriving daily, their sails like tired hands reaching for the shore. That evening, the warehouse clerk follows you to the dock and says, it's not theft, it's preservation. Your staff is larger. The rice is available. You also know that diverting the rice means missing the capital's delivery quota, that, if unmet, will trigger penalties on you. Your responsibility's broader. Power, constrained by policy, diluted by distance, and always at risk of being overruled by a single sentence from a higher desk. You're no longer just checking rice, you're managing the final tally. Every shipment that reaches the capital goes through you. You say nothing, because he's right. But so is the law. And you're just the one stuck between them. The illusion of abundance. You watch boats arrive late, damaged, missing cargo. You see how easily things fall apart. The flow of goods that holds an empire together with the thinnest threads of timing and truth. The next month, a delegation from the Board of Revenue visits. High collars, pressed robes, clean fingernails, reshuffling the remaining stock and scheduling 2 emergency barge deliveries from. You're doing good work. He smiles. Then, over tea, he leans in and says, how would you feel about a posting in Tangzhou, the final stop on the canal before Beijing? It's not just prestigiates. A place where a man could rise. You answer cautiously. If I can serve, I will. He nods, satisfied. But later that night, you lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. Let the boats drift. Just keep the rice moving. Weeks later, your transfer is confirmed. You arrive in Tangzhou in early spring. Your office is within sight of the city gate. You're handed a seal of office, carved with an imperial cloud pattern. The weight of it in your hand feels absurd. You are now, by all definitions, powerful. But it is a different kind of power. It is bureaucratic power. Your first test comes quickly. A garrison in Shaanxi reports a rice shortage. Their request for emergency grain is routed to you. You check the ledgers. The rules are clear. The Emperor's granaries come first. But you've seen what happens. When soldiers go hungry, rebellions don't begin in the capital. They begin on the edge. You approve the diversion. Then you write a second report. You'll likely be questioned, perhaps even fined, but you bought the garrison another week. Bought peace, for now, and perhaps that's enough. By now, you've stopped thinking of your job as managing grain. You're managing fragility. You read reports of unrest in the provinces, and yet, the capital eats. Every day, the Emperor's table is set. The palace kitchens burn bright. Because of men like you, sweating behind scrolls and ledgers, plugging leaks no one else sees. You realize the greatest lie the canal tells is that the empire is well fed because it is strong. But the truth is, the empire is strong because it is fed, and should the rice spoil again, should the barges stop, the whole illusion crumbles. You dip your brush one final time that night, finishing a scroll of updated storage figures. As you blow gently to dry the ink, you whisper, half aloud, let the water rise. Then you fold the scroll, place it in a dispatch box, and watch the courier disappear into the darkness. Another day, another shipment, another act of quiet salvation. You are 10 years old. The first time your father makes you copy the annal, he places the bamboo brush in your tiny hand, his fingers guiding yours as the strokes form the ancient words. Is it not a joy to learn and practice what is learned at due times? But you learn the shape of it, the way the brush must dip, just so. The way the characters must be balanced, neither rushed nor weak. Even then, you understand that precision is survival. You don't understand the sentence, not yet. You are one of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, raised in the long shadow of the imperial examination system. The vast machine built to find the most learned minds in the empire. Your older brother, brilliant and impatient, died of a fever at 13. Now, the burden falls on you. It is your family's only hope of rising. You know the lives of Confucius and Mencius. Like other boys know the names of generals. You arrive before dawn, robes pressed, scrolls sealed in a bamboo tube. The air is thick with nerves and sweat. You bring bedding, food, ink, brushes, and hope. The exam prompt is delivered through a small window. You are expected to write essays in strict 8-legged style, structured, balanced, and rhetorical. Dozens of boys and men some your age, some twice, that shuffle into narrow booths made of brick and wood. You quote Confucius, then Mencius, then your own ideas, woven into a lattice of logic. You cannot swim, but you can compose poetry in regulated verse. You have not kissed a girl, but you can debate filial piety for 3 hours without repetition. Your name is not important, not to the state. Your eyes blur. Rats scurry beneath the straw mat. Someone nearby sobs quietly. Someone else vomits from nerves. You are the second son of a minor clerk in Changzhou, a modest river city where books are more common than coins. The exam system promises advancement, but it promises it through pain. No battlefield scars, no duels, just ink, paper, and the slow erosion of your childhood. Your days become a cycle of repetition. Write, revise, recite, repeat. You no longer feel joy-only momentum. Your candle is trimmed to conserve wax. Your robes are patched, but your calligraphy is perfect. You eat millet, not pork. By the time you are 12, you can recite all 4 books and 5 classics from memory. You travel for days to reach the exam hall, an enormous complex of thousands of test cells. It is said the city breathes in when the exam begins, and docenti exhale until it is over. You rise before dawn to study and rest your head only after midnight. Your desk is a plank on bricks. You bow 3 times to the sealed chests that'll carry your future to the greatest. Your teacher, an aging scholar who failed the provincial exam 3 times, says, pass the Shengyuan exam, and your name will be known. Fail, and you are just another man with nice handwriting. You pass the county level exam at 14. You become a shukai, a cultivated talent, the first rung of the ladder. Your neighbors offer boiled eggs and sugar to celebrate. Your father weeps in silence, but now the real struggle begins. The prefectural exam is held 2 years later in the stone examination compound. Your mother holds the red paper to her chest and weeps, saying, your name lives now. Each candidate is locked in his cell for 3 days. You write about benevolence, ritual, loyalty, and order. A single slip in tone of phrase to original, to boldand. You may be dismissed as undisciplined, but your hand cramps. You finish. You survive. You join the caravan of scholars bound for Beijing, each of them dreaming of one of the top 3 ranks. You pass. You are now eligible to sit the provincial examination, the gateway to the imperial circuit. But between exams, years pass. You are not rich. You cannot afford full-time tutors or ink made from the finest pine suit. Your brush is worn. You copy your texts by candlelight. Still, you endure. You stop attending weddings. You decline festivals. Your mother says, if you pass, you will wear silk. You look down at your patched robe and wonder, will silk feel worth it after this? When you turn 23, you sit for the provincial exam. It is held in the city of Suzhou, known for its gardens and scholars. This time, you're more prepared. You know how to ration your food. You know which ink dries fast. You've memorized backup essay phrases, but the pressure is immense. Each essay must be perfect, not just in content, but in tone, rhythm, and conformity. You finish your script with trembling fingers. You hand it to the proctor. Then you wait. The results come a month later. You are one of only 53 men to pass out of more than 7,000. You are now a juror recommended man. The city parades your name on red paper. Your father dies that same week, heart failure. They say, he died knowing you passed. But your mind is not on celebration, because there is one more exam, the hardest of them all. The metropolitan examination, held once every 3 years in the capital, was supervised by ministers and judged by the emperor himself. You pack your belongings, a few books, a few brushes, a scroll of your best essays, because to pass this exam is to become a and to become a jinchi is to step beyond books into the halls of power. But as the capital walls rise before you, looming in gold under the morning sun, a thought flickers across your mind. After a life of study, do you even remember how to live? The city is immense, its walls red and towering, its gates crowded with carts, horses, pilgrims, vendors, and guards. You pass through Deshingmen Gate, your papers clutched tightly, and are swallowed by the capital's rhythm. The air is drier than in the south. You taste dust on your tongue and ambition in your chest. The metropolitan examination, the one. All your years have prepared you for beguines in a few days. You stay in a lodging house with 4 other examinees, all of them older than you. Some are already gray at the temples. This a little scribbling silently by candlelight, lips murmuring passages from Zuo Juan and the Book of Documents. You hardly sleep. It is said that the penalty is death. You believe it. On the morning of the exam, you enter the capital examination compound, an immense stone maze of one-person cells, arranged like the bones of a dragon. Guards search each candidate. Smuggled texts, mnemonic charms, and even hidden ink slips are confiscated. Cheating is a crime. You are assigned a test, cell bare cold, no wider than your arms stretched out. Just a plank for writing, a bucket for waste, a lantern, and a slab to sleep on. You'll be here for 3 full days and nights. Someone to cells away is coughing violently. You open your scroll packet and scan the prompt. Discuss the application of Confucian, virtue in the governance of border provinces. During times of famine and unrest, your breath catches. It's a complex question, demanding philosophy and policy, history and metaphor. You quote Mencius on compassion. You cite the Tanyera policies of famine relief. You interweave the proper balance between ritual decorum and pragmatic governance. You begin. Some boast loudly. Others drink quietly. All of you are waiting for the red boards. You avoid crowds of other candidates. You outline your structurate-legged essays, strict parallelism, and formal tone. Your brush moves slowly at first. Time blurs. Light fades. You write for hours. You sleep briefly. You write again. A few are already weeping, knowing their names won't be there. You tear out an essay midway, ashamed of its disjointed tone. You start over. Your script is clean. Your mind, less so. By the second night, your fingers are numb. Ink drips onto your robe. Rats scurry along the outer wall. But you do not stop, because you are so close. Closer than your brother ever came. Closer than your father ever dreamed. You'll finish on the 3rd morning. You do not collapse. You simply stare. As you pass your scroll to the collector and step into the sunlight, the world feels too bright. The wind cuts through your robe like a blade. You wait 2 months. Some men push forward, others hang back. You spend your days in borrowed rooms, helping a tea shop owner with bookkeeping in exchange for meals. The results are posted in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Names written in perfect calligraphy on long red scrolls, mounted on the palace wall for all to see. The day arrives. You are summoned to the palace gardens, where eunuchs guide you to a pavilion. You kneel with the other new Jinchi before a low screen. The emperor himself appears a distant silhouette in golden robes. You walk with heavy steps. There's a crowd gathered. You scan the scroll, top to bottom, carefully, and there in the 3rd column you see it. Is the memorial phrased with enough humility? Did you greet your superior with the correct number of bows? You enter the ministry hall, tall ceilings, scroll-lined walls, the air thick with incense and protocol. Your name, you are one of the You do not shout. You send money for a new roof. You close the letter with a poem about spring. For a long time, until someone behind you says, "Make way for the successful." You turn and walk away. The next week is a blur of ceremonies. You do not see his face clearly. You do not speak, but you feel his presence as a weight in the air. A clerk reads your name aloud. You bow until your forehead touches the floor. It is done. No examinations of virtue, only paperwork and hierarchy. You are now part of the literati elite, a scholar officii of the empire. You are assigned a junior position in the Ministry of Rites. You wear new robes, black with white lining, and carry a tablet carved with your name. You begin work, transcribing ritual procedures, organizing temple offerings, and drafting replies to provincial petitions. At first, you're honored, but soon, something shifts. You realize your years of preparations, the essays, the philosophy, the moral dilemmas do not matter here. What matters is form. Is the paper folded correctly? There are no debates here. Your brush hand begins to ache not from effort, but from emptiness. You write a letter to your mother. You tell her of the marble floors, the carved screens, and the gold thread robes. You tell her that your salary will arrive soon, but you don't tell her that at night. You sit alone in your room, staring at your own reflection in the ink bowl, and whisper, "Now what?" Because you've won. You've climbed the ladder. You've passed the final test. And yet, the Ministry of Rights is quiet. Not in the peaceful way the gardens are quiet, but in the careful way the tombs are. Every morning, you bow to your superiors, receive your task for the day, and sit down to write memorial responses, ceremonial scripts, seasonal registry updates, corrections to ancestral temple protocols. Nothing you write carries your name. Nothing you draft will ever be seen by the emperor. Each word spoken is weighed. Each step was measured, each breath controlled. You work in a long, narrow room, lined with lacquered desks. You'll carry scrolls, verify protocols, and ensure incense is lit at the exact prescribed hour. And yet it matters. Or so they say. You rise early. You eat plain rice and boiled greens. You wear the regulation robes. Your tablet hangs at your side, polished, bearing your name in carved characters. And each evening, you return to your quarters. Remove your hat and stare at your brush rack in silence. Do you remember the last time someone asked us to think? This is the life you trained for. At times, you are sent to observe ritual events, ancestral sacrifices, seasonal offerings, and examinations of temples. A junior official placed a grain vessel half a foot out of alignment. You correct him quietly. He bows deeply. No one thanks you, but later, you find an extra ration of sweet buns in your office basket. A silent recognition. Once, during a spring ritual at the Temple of Heaven, this is how merit is acknowledged, now not with applause, but with subtleties. Then both of you look down at your soup bowls. You've learned to read them. Your colleagues are scholars like you, products of the same system, shaped by the same pages. Some are quiet, some are cold. A few are bitter. One man, a fellow Jinshi from Hunan, leans toward you during lunch one day and murmurs. You remember the feel of those wooden booths, the sickly smell of ink and wax, and the throb of sleeplessness behind your eyes. You smile, faintly. You confiscate hidden notes and find someone for copying from a neighbor. You begin keeping a private journal not of events, but of questions. Pages and pages of questions. What does it mean to serve when your service is reduced to a format? What is virtue when your voice cannot question authority? He argues a subtle point about the balance between Li and Yi. It's not bold enough to be dangerous, but it's not bland either. What is knowledge? If it ends at the palace gate, you do not share these thoughts. You are not foolish. The walls have ears, and some words, even when whispered, travel far. 2 years into your post, your promotion arrived. You are transferred to a district-level office outside, tasked with overseeing the local exam process for future Sukai candidates. It is a position of honor, of trust. It is also a return to where your journey began. You take the appointment. The harder thing is remembering why you wanted to. In Kafun, you walk the dusty courtyard, where boys with shaved heads and trembling hands await their fate. You watch them arrive, some with rich fathers, some with empty shoes, all desperate to ascend. Your brushstrokes are neater now. Your understanding is deeper. You inspect their papers. You remind them of the rules. You see yourself in every one of them. A boy growing old, copying words he dares not speak aloud. And yet you feel strangely outside it all now. Not above, but just distant. As if the test no longer holds meaning. One boy stands out. He's young, maybe 50. His script is shaky, but his logic is sharp. You mark him for advancement. Later, after the results are announced, he finds you near the courtyard wall. He bows deeply and asks, "Master, what comes next?" You hesitate. What do you say? Study harder. Serve the empire. Rise in rank. Instead, you tell him, gently, keep your mind clear and your heart soft. The harder thing is not passing. He nods, unsure if he understands, but he bows again, deeper this time, and walks away. That night, you sit beneath an oil lamp and unfold the Analects. You cop it as a child. You reach the line again. Is it not a joy to learn and practice what is learned at due times? You whisper it aloud, and you wonder, did Confucius imagine this life when he wrote that? A scholar in a quiet room, writing rules that others will memorize but never question. Is this joy, or is it just silence? You roll up the scroll, blow out the flame, and lie back in the darkness. The exam system is still there. The empire is still there. And you faithful, tired, quiet are still here. You think? Your hands tremble as you adjust the cuffs of your robe. Not from fear, though, that would be understandable, but from sheer exhaustion. You've been up since before the second watch, your nerves held taut by an endless sequence of bells, drums, and the hollow footsteps of ceremonial runners. You're the man charged with ensuring the ceremony goes perfectly. Today is no ordinary court day. It was a weapon, a tool of control, a labyrinth so intricate it devoured its own makers, which ordered a bow before jade versus silk. And how many paces between the emperor's seat and a foreign envoy's sandals? Today, the emperor receives a tribute envoy from the western and you, because in the Qing imperial court, perfection isn't just admired, it's one misplaced bow, one improperly positioned jade token, one forgotten incense, stick and entire lives unraveled. In the Qing dynasty, ritual was not a performance, and you are caught inside it. You are a court ritual assistant, a low-ranking official in the Board of Rites, assigned to the Hall of Central Harmony, one of the great ceremonial spaces at the heart of the Forbidden City. You earned this post, not through status or bloodline, but through years of memorizing ancient court protocols. Which hand holds, which seal you thought. You understood ritual. Until you came here. Until you watched a nobleman demoted for stepping forward 2 seconds too early. Until you witnessed a minister reduced to silence for misquoting the tribute protocol from the Han Dynasty. Until you were ordered to stand in the same place, motionless, for 3 hours, holding a brush no one would ever use just to complete the symmetry of a hall. This morning's ceremony is a nightmare of moving parts. The envoy, a grizzled prince from the far western frontier, has brought 5 camels, 6 crates of embroidered wool, and a scroll of formal allegiance. He does not know the rituals. The emperor rises, robes billowing like dawn mist, and departs. The court begins to shuffle. Musicians lower their flutes, guards relax their posture. He does not speak Mandarin well. You are to compile the corrective ritual protocol before dusk. He bows at the wrong angle. You saw it happen. You saw his forehead brush the floor once, not thrice. You felt the air change, like a ripple moving across a still lake. The ritual must be restored, at least on paper, and someone's record must bear the scar of failure. Everyone noticed. You unroll the court tribute protocol compendium, a document copied from an earlier edition written during the reign of Your fingers find the passage. Foreign lords must perform the triple katal, with a triple prostration in rhythm with the central drum, because the emperor had not yet spoken. The ceremony concludes. Then, quietly, an imperial secretary approaches you. He says, "Only the error has been noted." Your throat tightens. The meaning is clear. The blame, while not formally assigned, must be handled. The envoy must be instructed. If not his, then whose? They whisper. A minister sees your name. Recommend future clarification in the instructional script and minor correction logged without a punitive note. Remembers it. Writes it down. You retreat to your scriptorium, a cool, quiet room lined with scrolls. There's no ambiguity. The envoy did it wrong. But did you instruct him properly? Courtyard's empty. Lanterns glow like suspended stars. Servants whisper and vanish around corners. Did your colleague, who translated the pre-ritual instructions, mention the need to bow 3 times? Or was that left out in haste? Never cross under its arch alone unless summoned. You could clarify that in your report. You could include the omission, soften the weight of error, and share the blame. But you also know how these things unfold. Reports grow legs. You dip your brush in ink. You're right. The envoy performed the ritual in good faith, though lacking clear comprehension of the specific form of triple prostration. No formal disrespect was intended. It's careful, measured, a lifeline, not an accusation. You seal it, submit it, then sit back, hands cold despite the spring heat. Later that evening, word comes down. The envoy is not punished, but neither are you commended. The report is filed, its language quoted in the Board of Rights internal bulletin. You survived. This time. You walk through the palace grounds. In the dimming light, you pass the gate of supreme harmony and pause. This gate, you recall, has its ritual sequence. Enter with your right foot. Do not speak until you pass the fifth tile. You follow the rules automatically, not out of belief, out of reflex. Because in this court, ritual is not Fathet's instinct, a way to survive, a place that has replaced morality with precision and replaced humanity with etiquette. And yet, as you return to your chamber and remove your heavy silk robe, folding it carefully on its lacquered stand, you feel no triumph, only fatigue. Because tomorrow, another ceremony awaits, and another potential mistake, and another brush with invisible danger. And you wonder, in a system built on ritual, what happens when no one remembers why they bow and lee how? The next morning, your fingers are already stained with ink. Before the sun crests over the imperial roofline, you are rewriting the protocol guide for the mid-autumn moon offering. The ceremony so old, its origins predate the very dynasty you serve. The guide has been rewritten dozens of times, yet no two editions are alike. Some specify the exact order in which the fruit offerings must be placed. Others insist on particular incense types, or which courtier must step forward first during the ceremonial bow. It is your job now to harmonize them, to create a final, correct version. Except there is no correct version, only precedents, and precedents of precedents, and interpretations of those precedents. You feel like a man trapped in a hall of mirrors, trying to decide which reflection was the original. Midway through your revision, a page from the Board of Music arrives. He bows 3 times, each precisely timed, and hands you a query scroll. In the upcoming ceremony, must the zithers be tuned to the 5th mode, or the rising 6th, given the lunar positioning? You stare at the note. There is no clear answer. Both modes were acceptable under different Qing Empire. One is favored during full moon ceremonies, the other under partial eclipse conditions. But the moon's phase that night will be ambiguous. You write back. The page bows and retreats, silent as ever, given the ambiguous lunar condition. I recommend deferring to the musical mode used during the 1721 Mid-Autumn ceremony under IMPERIAL. As recorded in the Palace Harmonies Volume 4, you seal the reply. You sit back, rubbing your temples. This is your world now. Interpretation without certainty, authority without clarity, and punishment without warning. Later that afternoon, your supervisor summons you. His beard is white. His robes are always perfect. A well-respected senior ritualist. He has served 3 emperors and survived 6 major court He tells you, without emotion, that your handling of the tribute envoy era last week was satisfactory, but that some found your wording too lenient. He advises you to be more precise in delineating culpability in future filings. You bow lower than usual. The message is clear. Even compassion is dangerous here. You leave his office and head to the ceremonial arc of a narrow room, lined with scrolls, so old the characters flake from their silk when unrolled. No one in court has ever mentioned it. Here lie the bones of 1,000 rituals, collected from dynasties long dead: Song, Tang, Han, and Zhou. One passage catches your eye. When the fire in the brazier goes out during a winter solstice, right? The closest minister must remove his hat and kneel until the flame returns. You blink. You've never seen this rule before. But here it is, in a scroll. Copy it. In the 13th year of the Kangxi Emperor's reign, preserved in a cabinet that rarely sees light. What happens if this rule is forgotten in the modern ceremony? But memory fades. What fills the space when memory is gone? What happens if a fire goes out and no one kneels? Is the ritual invalidated? You do not dare keep a journal. You are told to prepare the ceremonial steps for her procession. Even the walls whisper. Is the empire weakened? Two of the variants contradict each other. Or does nothing happen at all? You return to your chamber and write a note to yourself. Ritual is memory. You placed a note under your ink. The funeral rites are your department's responsibility. Days pass. A noble woman dies, an imperial cousin with modest influence. You open the manual. There are 13 variants for noble funerals, depending on rank, age, relation, timing of death, and celestial alignment, unless someone else has a better memory. You consult your colleague. He shrugs. I'd follow the precedent from 1786, he says. Silk is burned. Court mourners weep on cue. And that's the heart of the matter. This court runs on memory, not meaning, and when memory fades, the court decays silently. The funeral proceeds. Incense is lit. And yet, during the procession, one of the ceremonial umbrellas bearing a crimson tassel falls from its pole. No one speaks, but everyone sees. Later that night, 2 attendants are quietly dismissed from service, and the tassel is replaced. Its loss is noted in the ceremonial record as unforeseen disruption. Nothing more. You realize something then. This system, the entire web of rites, protocols, and gestures does not care about belief, only about performance. You don't have to believe in the power of the bow. You only have to bow, and if enough people bow at the right moment, the illusion holds. That evening, as you adjust your robe for the next day's event, you notice your hands don't shake anymore. Not from fear, not even from exhaustion, just from habit. You look at yourself in the polished bronze mirror. Your posture is perfect. Your expression is neutral. Your body is a diagram of etiquette. And you think, what's left of you that isn't ritual? Winter arrives with little ceremony. In the Forbidden City, the chill doesn't drift. In it seeps, slow and steady, through stone corridors and painted eaves, past embroidered curtains and beneath your layered robes. You've memorized the route from your chamber to the Hall of Literary Glory well enough to walk it in the dark. But now your breath fogs with every step. The palace firekeepers light braziers before dawn, but they burn low by mid-morning. Ink freezes in its pot. Scrolls become brittle. And still, the rituals continue. 27 steps, 72 coordinated movements. Each action was measured to the heartbeat of a ceremonial drum. The emperor will perform his part. So will the high ministers. And if any participant errs, you will be questioned. The winter sacrifice to heaven is approaching a major court ceremony, one that requires absolute precision. You've been assigned to oversee the sequence of kneeling gestures during the sacrifice. You've seen it happen, not punished, not directly. You review the spatial markers on the altar floor, double-check the incense placement, and inspect the ashtrays and the drum housing. Everything is aligned. But the scrutiny of the Board of Rites can be worse than any punishment. Quiet disapproval, the slow erosion of trust, the gradual removal of responsibilities. Men vanish from the registry. Sometimes their names do, too. You arrive early to the Temple of Heaven. Your notes are in order. Your diagrams were copied but still, a tremor lingers beneath your ribs, because something always goes wrong. He steps up to the central platform, and you're no longer afraid of being blamed. The emperor appears last, carried beneath a silk canopy, his robes shimmering with threads, so fine they seem to move in the windless air. You're afraid you'll stop caring when you are. As dawn breaks, the court arrives, ministers in crimson robes, eunuchs holding silver-tipped staffs, and musicians lining up with their flutes and gongs. You kneel as he passes. You don't see his face. You rarely do. He's a presence more than a man, now in embodiment of order, the pivot of the entire machine. The ritual begins. The timing is holding. You count each beat of the drum in your head. Kneel. Rise. Step bow. Step back. He resumes the sequence. But that pause is now burned into memory. Turning glance toward the chief musician, he nods. You do not mention the flute error directly. Instead, you note that musical coordination reached full alignment by the 40th beat. You exhale. Then, at the 39th beat, a flute misses its cue. It's a fraction of a second. The sound is off too early. Most won't notice, but you do. And worse, you see the Emperor's hand. Pause only briefly. Far north, near the frontier. A place where winters are harsher, food is scarcer, and flutes rarely play. And if he noticed, someone must pay. After the ceremony, the palace returns to routine. You return to your office and begin writing the ceremonial summary scroll, noting the timing, alignment, and compliance of each segment. It's enough. Anyone reading it closely will understand, and says, ritual is the one true constant. Dynasties rise and fall, but the bow remains. You don't need to name the musician. You've learned how to speak through omission. Later that week, you hear that the flute player has been reassigned, not dismissed, just transferred to a posting in the north. You feel nothing. No victory, no guilt, just the turning of the wheel. That night, you are invited to a private gathering of mid-ranking ritual officers. Your seal is carved from jade. Your robes are trimmed with sable. You move with purpose. Tea is poured. Candles flicker. Poetry is recited, as required. One officer, older than you by 20 years, offers a toast. Everyone nods. You nod too, but inside, something shifts, because you've begun to wonder, what if the bow remains? Because we've forgotten how to stand. The moon is full. The tiled roofs shimmer like polished bone. The new year approaches. You are promoted Deputy Secretary of Rites. It's a prestigious role. You now review ritual manuals, oversee junior officials, and occasionally attend imperial councils as a silent observer. But each evening, when the lamps are extinguished and your chamber is quiet, you feel as though your body is performing a ritual of its own. You no longer authored. Rise. Walk. Bow. Inhale. Right. Exhale. Nod. There's no resistance left. Only rhythm. And when you visit the Temple of Heaven to oversee a new junior officer's training, he asks, Master, why do we bow 3 times and not 4? You pause. And for the first time in years, you don't know what to say. You've memorized the answer, but you've forgotten if it means anything. You walk the temple's outer wall alone that evening. The sky is clear, and you think, when the ritual becomes more important than the person, what remains of the person? You stop walking. You bow once without ceremony, without record, then turn and disappear into the shadow of the gate. You know the Emperor will never notice, but that was never the point. No banners fly here, no royal seals, no silk robes, no tax scrolls tied in golden twine. Just dust. Dust in your nostrils, your hair, your food. Dust that settles in your bed and in your joints and in the crease of your newborn son. It drifts like fog across the plain and coats everything in a thin, whispering layer of silence. You live in a village without a name, on the far edge of the 10th dynasty's western frontier, somewhere between the Yellow River's elbow and the broken spine of a long, dormant mountain range. It's not on any map. The cold wakes you. You don't have a clock. Only the sky's slow lightning and the dry cough of your eldest son in the corner. Your house is mud brick and straw thatch, with a wooden beam your grandfather raised himself. There's no window pane, only a cloth flap. Wind winds through the cracks, like an uninvited guest. Not really. No meat-only special days. No fruit nuts since last season's drought. You choose slowly. You've never seen anyone who's seen him, but his face is on coins. His name is on the temple tablet. His laws are read by the county magistrate once a year, under the ginkgo tree. Your wife brews tea so thin it's almost clear. The nearest post station is 10 li away. The nearest tax officer, 20. If it weren't for the occasional courier on horseback or a wandering monk, you might forget the Empire even exists. Every voice, and sometimes you suspect the Empire has forgotten you. You just started sitting in his seat during winter gatherings. Now they look to you during planting decisions, during funerals, during locusts. There's Widow Lan, who still sings to her dead husband's grain sack, and the Jung twins, always running, always barefoot, always in trouble. The cabbage split too early, his boots cracked, but his robe bears the faded blue trim of the Imperial grain office. He doesn't dismount. He calls the elders to the center of the village and unfurls a scroll, and the beans didn't come up at all. Your day begins before dawn. You eat millet porridge with a pinch of salt. Then it's to the fields. Your land is dry this year, drier than most. You want to believe those years can return, that the river will shift again, ledgers that list places like yours as dots and numbers, that your son won't grow up knowing only dryness and debt. And listen to your wife's slow breathing beside you. Your fingers trace the calluses on your palm, the marks of a farmer, a father, a subject. The river shifted its bed last spring, and now the furrows run dry before noon. You've tried everything. Digging deeper channels, praying to the earth gods, even mixing ox dung with the topsoil to trap moisture. Nothing works. The barley came up pale. There's no tax collector this season. Not yet. Maybe more. They won't care about the river, or the sun, or the fact that the ox died in the frost last winter. You'll offer what you have. They'll take most of it. You'll bow and thank them. But you know they'll come, even here. Even to a place the Empire never visits except to take. When they do, they'll expect the same quota as last year, because anything else would be suicide. You wonder sometimes about the Emperor. He's a distant mythoman of silk and dragons, living behind vermilion walls in Chang'an. You've never seen him. They say he brings order, that he balances heaven and earth. But when your youngest daughter died of fever last winter, no order came, only stillness. Your village is small, maybe 40 families. Half are related. The others are close enough to be. You know every face. There's old Pang, whose wife hasn't spoken since the locust storm. You're the eldest male in your household now. That happened quietly, after your uncle fell into the well last spring. No one said anything. It's a strange thing, being important in a place the world doesn't recognize. One day, a rider appeared. His horse is thin. There's a drought reported across the region, he says. The court is aware. Relief measures are being considered. The harvest will be reviewed. Then he reads from the Emperor's decree formally. You catch the words grace, stability, faith. You bow with the others. You nod when prompted. You do not believe. Because no food comes. No water. No silver. Just the words. And the dust. You try to be patient. You remember stories your grandfather told. Better years, of plentiful rains, of barley so tall it hid the children. But each season feels shorter, the winds sharper, the fields more reluctant to bloom. And the Empire, it is far away. It has roads that never reach here. You think, if our name is not on their maps, do they even remember we exist? You lie in bed that night, the thatch above you twitching in the breeze. You wonder what it means to belong to a dynasty that never visits. You wonder, can you be loyal to a ruler who doesn't know your village exists? It's the third week of waiting. The scroll reader from the grain office hasn't returned. The sky has remained a pale. Taut sheet above you, no clouds. No promise. The paddies have cracked open, dry as pottery. The millet has curled. Even the stubborn weeds have begun to die. Still, you get up each morning. You work because it's all you've ever known. They didn't ask permission. They just left, as quietly as a shadow, crossing a door frame, because even when there's no hope of harvest, the ritual of farming must continue. The act of planting, of tending even, when fruitless is a form of resistance. Some have begun to leave, Two families packed their carts and went east, chasing rumors of wells that haven't dried. They didn't say goodbye, but most stay. Because where would you go? The smoke curls lazily, like it too is reluctant to rise. Even if the Empire remembered you existed, would it feed you? Your village, priest a stooped man with a twisted foot, and a voice like dried reeds declares, "It's time for a rain ritual." The elders gather. You are among them now. He burns a strip of bamboo, just walks slowly back to his hut, and doesn't come out for 2 days. He chants to the river god, though the river itself has vanished into sandbanks. Children scatter wildflowers along the path to the shrine. Women leave bowls of rice at its foot. You kneel and place your hands on the stone offering slab. You close your eyes. You imagine the rain. Not thunder or downpour, just the soft sound of droplets on clay roofs. No guard, just a book tied in cloth in a satchel that jingles faintly. But the next day, the sky remains blank. The priest says nothing. A man in worn scholar's robes, hair tied high, eyes too sharp for a traveler your lineage. How many in your household? How many mu of land? How many sacks of grain you lost? The old women begin whispering. Perhaps we've been forgotten. You don't disagree. Then a stranger arrives. Not an imperial messenger. He carries no wagon. He says he's come to record stories of the drought, observes everything, measures the width of the dry riverbed, counts the village oxen, records birth and death tallies. He listens to the stories of the old men, of floods past, of frost years, of the bandits who once rode in from the north and vanished like ghosts. By whose authority? Someone asks. 2 guards, an official bearing a jade chop, a banner with the Imperial Sunan mountain seal. He smiles, as if the question is beneath him. The Empire's. Of course. The elders offer him millet. He sits beneath a willow by the meeting hall. His robes hem brushes cracked earth. All villages west of the canal line and south of the northern bend shall receive a temporary suspension of grain tax. He opens his book and begins asking questions. You are brought before him. He asks your name. You answer slowly, carefully. Then he asks, do you still feel loyal to the Emperor? You stare at him. It's a trap. It must be. So, you say. I serve, as I always have, with my hands. He writes this down. He stays for 3 days, he writes quietly. Then, one morning, he's gone. No goodbye. No message. Just a missing bowl from the tea set and a damp patch where the dew gathered on his sleeping mat. You hear nothing for weeks, until a caravan arrives. 3 carts. The tax officer steps down. He reads a new scroll. By decree of the Temps Court, a relief grant will be issued 3 sacks of rice per family, to be delivered within the fortnight. The villagers stare, not at the rice, not at the cart, because you were the one who spoke to the stranger. And now, rice has come, not enough to thrive, not enough to last the winter, but enough to remind you that you're not invisible. That night, the village gathers by torchlight. You light incense at the altar. You pour tea for the ancestors. The priest chants once more, voice clearer than before. You don't thank the Emperor, not directly, but someone places a single polished stone on the altar and murmurs, he remembered. You lie down later and listen to the wind rattling the thing. There is no rain, but the dust smells different. Less like forgetting, more like a pause before a change. You wonder, if stories saved us this time, who will remember to tell ours again when the sky turns dry? The rice arrives 2 days late, but it arrives. 3 government-marked sacks are placed at the edge of the village under guard. Each bears the Emperor's seal, though the ink is already smudging from travel, and 1 bag is torn at the seam. Still, it's rice. Real rice. Not millet. Not roots. Not boiled weeds. Your wife cries when she touches it. You do not. You offer the final handfuls to the widow with no sons, and no one protests. In a village like yours, hunger doesn't ask for fairness, only survival. You've spent too long learning how not to. The distribution is orderly. You help measure it out to equal portions, careful to weigh each share twice. The children laugh for the first time in weeks. There's soup on the fire. The air still carries dust, but it's lighter somehow, as though it knows it no longer owns you entirely. You allow yourself a second bowl. You eat it slowly. You think of your father's hands, your son's thin wrists, and the long chain of lives tied to these fields, none of whom have ever stepped inside the walls of Chang'an. Imperial surveyors are coming to redraw boundaries after the rivers shift. You're to show your land, your tools, and your house. The courier returns with news. A land review will follow. The Empire, it seems, is remembering you again. You feel nothing. Not pride. Not anger. He walks your cracked patties with a scroll in hand, asking questions you've never been asked before. Only the dull weight of inevitability. The surveyor arrives with his own guards. Then he folds his scroll, nods once, and tells you the tax exemption will remain in place. For now. He wears a clean tunic and carries a brass compass. How many mouths are in this home? How many times did the field fail to yield? Are your boundary stones still where your grandfather placed them? You answer. But he doesn't look at you. He writes. He sketches. He measures with a cord. He does not say thank you, and you do not ask him to. That night, you speak to your son under the stars. He's old enough now to plant with you, old enough to ask questions you don't know how to answer. On the way, neighbors leave a little extra firewood near your door without saying anything. On the way, you bury your ancestors where they can still hear the wind and the songs. Why did they help this time? He asks. You say, because they remembered. He frowns. Will they forget again? You stare at the night sky, where the moon rises pale and full over the ridge. You want to tell him yes. You want to say, always, as though something deep beneath the surface is waking up again. But instead, you tell him, that's why we remember each other. Because this village was never built on promises. It was built on calluses, on handshakes. On the way you endure, a month passes. The river changes again. Not fully, just a meandering shift, and it's edge enough that one of the outer fields begins to soak again. Enough to hope, if only slightly. You walk it alone at dawn. Your boots sink into the damp soil. A bird stirs in the reeds. The wind smells different here. You kneel, dig your fingers into the earth, and feel it. Moisture. It doesn't matter. The song is more memory than melody anyway. Not much, but enough. You return to the village and begin tilling. No one tells you to. No one asks why. But by midday, 5 others are beside you. Then the Zhang twins, barefoot as ever, chasing a frog across the rows. The land is not cured, but it is no longer dead. A memory. At night, the children rehearse a festival song. One they haven't sung in years. They forget half the words. Will the land remember us anyway? You sit by the fire and close your eyes. You do not think of the emperor. You do not think of taxes or scrolls or surveyors. You think of the village with no name and how it carved a space for itself in the margins, not by being seen, but by refusing to disappear. The dust still blows. The river still shifts. The empire still forgets. But now there is a record, somewhere, of your field. A name, scratched into a register. A weight of rice was measured and delivered. Maybe small, maybe temporary, but maybe not. And you wonder, if the empire forgets again,